Sometimes the smallest acts of kindness create the biggest miracles. What happens when a man who has given up on the world opens his door to a stranger bleeding on his doorstep? What happens when that stranger turns out to be the answer to prayers he never knew he was praying? This is the story of Marcus Johnson, a 45-year-old security guard who thought his life was over, and Sarah Chun, a 19-year-old college student who crashed into his world on the worst night of both their lives. Neither of them knew that one stormy evening in Detroit would transform two broken souls into an unbreakable bond that would inspire thousands. In a world where we walk past strangers every day, where we lock our doors and mind our own business, this story reminds us that sometimes the person we're meant to help is the same person meant to save us. Sometimes the greatest gift we can give is also the greatest gift we receive. Get ready for a journey that will make you believe in second chances, the power of human connection, and the extraordinary things that happen when we choose compassion over caution. Marcus Johnson pulled his worn jacket tighter around his shoulders as he walked up the cracked concrete steps to his apartment building. The Detroit rain hammered the pavement like angry fists, and the wind carried the smell of wet garbage and broken dreams. At 45, Marcus had learned to keep his head down and his expectations lower. The security guard job at the downtown office building barely paid the bills, but it was steady work, and steady was all he could hope for these days. His apartment on the third floor of the rundown building was nothing special. 2 small rooms, a kitchen the size of a closet, and a bathroom where the hot water worked only when it felt like it. But it was his. And after sleeping in his car for 6 months after losing his previous job, having a roof over his head felt like luxury. Marcus had been living alone for 3 years now, ever since his divorce from Linda became final. She had taken their daughter Maya with her to California, and the child support payments meant Marcus lived on rice and beans most nights. The loneliness was the hardest part. Marcus remembered when his life had been different. He had been a machine operator at the Ford plant for 15 years, making good money, owning a small house with a backyard where Maya could play. He had friends who came over for Sunday football games, a wife who used to laugh at his jokes, and a daughter who thought he was the strongest man in the world. That felt like someone else's life now. The plant had closed down 4 years ago, taking Marcus's job and his sense of purpose with it. The unemployment benefits ran out faster than he expected, and finding new work in his 40s proved harder than anyone had warned him. Linda tried to be patient at first, but watching their savings disappear and their house go into foreclosure changed something between them. The fight started small but grew bigger, and eventually, she packed up Maya and left for her sister's place in Los Angeles. Marcus had tried to follow them once, spending his last $200 on a bus ticket to California. But Linda met him at the station and told him she was filing for divorce. She said she needed stability for Maya, and Marcus represented everything unstable in her life. The ride back to Detroit was the longest 36 hours of his life. That was 3 years ago. Since then, Marcus had spoken to Maya exactly 12 times over video calls that Linda reluctantly allowed. His daughter was 15 now, almost a young woman, and she spoke to him like he was a stranger. She called Linda's new boyfriend Dad and talked about her new school, and new friends like Marcus had never existed. Each conversation left him feeling emptier than before. Tonight was particularly bad because today marked the anniversary of the divorce. Marcus had spent his lunch break sitting in his security booth, staring at old pictures on his phone. There was one of Maya when she was 7, missing her front teeth, grinning as she showed off a drawing she had made of their family. In the picture, she had drawn Marcus as a giant, towering over everyone else with huge muscles and a cape. "My daddy is a superhero," she had written in purple crayon. The security job was easy but mind-numbing. Marcus spent 8 hours a night walking empty hallways, checking doors that were already locked, watching camera screens that showed nothing but empty parking lots and sleeping streets. The building housed several small businesses and a few law offices, all closed by 6 in the evening. Marcus was alone with his thoughts, and the cleaning lady who came through around midnight and spoke only Spanish. He had tried to make friends with the other security guards who worked different shifts, but they were younger men with families and futures. They were polite but distant and Marcus understood that his loneliness was visible in a way that made people uncomfortable. People could sense defeat on him like a smell, and it made them want to keep their distance. The apartment building where Marcus lived was full of people like him. The divorced man in 2B who drank too much and played country music too loud. The elderly woman in 1A who had 17 cats and talked to herself in the hallways. The young mother in 3C who worked 3 jobs and never had time to do laundry, so her kids always looked like they had dressed themselves in the dark. They were all hanging on by their fingernails, too tired to help each other and too proud to ask for help. Marcus had stopped hoping for things to get better. He had stopped making plans beyond paying next month's rent. He had stopped believing that anyone would ever need him or want him around. His routine was simple: work, sleep, eat whatever was cheapest, send money to Maya when he could, and try not to think too hard about how different his life had turned out from what he had imagined. The rain was coming down harder now, turning the streets into rivers that carried away cigarette butts and fast food wrappers. Marcus fumbled with his keys at the front door of his building, his fingers numb from the cold. The lock was sticky and required just the right touch, a skill Marcus had learned through months of frustration. As he finally got the door open, a flash of lightning illuminated the street behind him, followed immediately by thunder that seemed to shake the building's foundation. He was almost to the stairs when he heard it, a soft moaning sound, barely audible over the storm. Marcus stopped and listened, thinking it might be Mrs. Rodriguez's cats or maybe the wind playing tricks on him. But then he heard it again, and this time it sounded distinctly human. Someone was in pain. Marcus looked around the empty lobby, but the sound seemed to be coming from outside. Against his better judgment, he pushed the front door back open and stepped onto the covered porch area. The wind immediately soaked him, but he could hear the moaning more clearly now. Someone was hurt, and they were close. He walked to the edge of the porch and looked down the side of the building where the dumpsters were kept. At first, he saw nothing but shadows and rain. Then, another lightning flash revealed a small figure crumpled against the brick wall, partially hidden behind a pile of garbage bags. It looked like a young person, maybe a teenager, and they were not moving much. Marcus's first instinct was to go back inside. This was Detroit, and getting involved with strangers found in dark alleys was a good way to end up robbed, stabbed, or worse. He had learned to mind his own business, to keep his head down, to survive by not taking risks. But as he turned to go back inside, he heard the sound again. It was weak and desperate, the sound of someone who was badly hurt and probably dying. He thought about Maya, about how he would want someone to help her if she was hurt and alone in the rain. He thought about the man he used to be, the man who had once helped his neighbors change flat tires and jumped strangers' cars in parking lots without being asked. That man seemed like a ghost now, but maybe he was still in there somewhere. Marcus walked down the porch steps into the rain, soaking himself completely within seconds. He made his way to the side of the building, stepping carefully over broken bottles and puddles that reflected the streetlights like black mirrors. As he got closer, he could see that the figure was definitely a young woman, probably Asian, with long dark hair plastered to her head by the rain. She was wearing a light jacket and jeans, completely inadequate for weather like this. She was conscious, but barely, her eyes half open and unfocused. There was blood on her forehead, and her left arm was bent at an angle that didn't look right. She had been beaten, badly, and left here to die in the storm. Marcus knelt beside her, his heart pounding as he tried to figure out what to do. "Hey," he said softly, not wanting to startle her. "Hey, can you hear me?" The girl's eyes focused on him for a moment, and he could see the fear there. She tried to move away from him, but she was too weak. Her lips moved, but no sound came out except for a weak whimper. "I'm not going to hurt you," Marcus said, surprised by how gentle his own voice sounded. He had not used that tone with anyone in years. "You're hurt. I want to help you. Can you tell me your name?" The girl stared at him for a long moment, and Marcus could see her trying to decide whether to trust him. Finally, she whispered something that sounded like Sarah. "Okay, Sarah. I'm Marcus. I live in this building, and I'm going to help you, okay? But first, I need to know if you can move. Can you sit up?" Sarah tried to push herself up with her right arm, but the effort made her cry out in pain. Marcus could see that she was in bad shape, possibly with internal injuries. She needed a hospital, but she also needed to get out of this rain before she went into shock or worse. "Listen, Sarah," Marcus said, making a decision that surprised him. "I'm going to call an ambulance, but first I need to get you somewhere dry and warm. I'm going to carry you up to my apartment, okay? I know you don't know me, but I promise I'm just trying to help." Sarah looked at him with eyes that seemed much older than her young face. She nodded slightly, and Marcus could see that she was running out of strength. He slipped one arm under her knees and another behind her back, lifting her as gently as he could. She was lighter than he expected, probably not more than 110 pounds, and she felt fragile in his arms, like she might break if he held her too tightly. The walk up 3 flights of stairs was harder than Marcus had anticipated. Sarah drifted in and out of consciousness, and several times he had to stop and check to make sure she was still breathing. By the time he reached his apartment door, both of them were shivering uncontrollably, and Marcus's legs felt like they might give out. He managed to get his door open and carried Sarah inside, laying her carefully on his old couch. She looked even younger in the light of his apartment, maybe 18 or 19, with delicate features that reminded him of Maya. Her jacket was torn, and Marcus could see bruises on her arms that looked like finger marks. Someone had hurt this girl deliberately and hurt her badly. Marcus grabbed every blanket he owned and covered Sarah carefully, then turned up the heat as high as it would go. He found his first aid kit, a dusty box he had bought years ago and never used, and tried to remember what little he knew about treating injuries. The cut on Sarah's forehead was still bleeding, but it didn't look deep enough to need stitches. Her left arm worried him more. It might be broken. As he cleaned the blood from her face with a damp cloth, Sarah's eyes opened again. This time they were more focused, and she looked around the small apartment with confusion. "Where am I?" she whispered. "You're in my apartment," Marcus said. "I found you outside in the rain. You were hurt pretty bad. I need to call an ambulance." Sarah's eyes widened with what looked like panic. "No," she said, trying to sit up. "No hospitals. No police. Please." Marcus was confused. "Sarah, you're really hurt. You need medical attention. What happened to you? Who did this?" Sarah started crying then, quiet tears that mixed with the rainwater still dripping from her hair. "I can't," she said. "I can't go to a hospital. Please don't make me." Marcus sat back on his heels, studying this mysterious girl who had crashed into his empty life. Every instinct told him to call 911, to let the professionals handle whatever this was. But something in Sarah's voice, something in the way she looked at him with such desperate trust, made him hesitate. "Okay," he heard himself say. "No hospitals. But you need help, and I don't know much about this stuff. Can you at least tell me what happened?" Sarah closed her eyes and was quiet for so long that Marcus thought she had passed out again. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible. "My boyfriend," she said. "Ex-boyfriend. He found out where I was staying." Marcus felt something cold settle in his stomach. He had seen enough domestic violence cases in his security job to know what that meant. "Did he do this to you?" Sarah nodded, fresh tears streaming down her cheeks. "I thought I got away from him. I moved here from Chicago 3 months ago, started school at Wayne State. But he found me tonight. He was waiting outside my dorm room." "What's his name?" Marcus asked. "We should call the police." "No," Sarah said firmly. "You don't understand. He's a police officer. In Chicago. He has friends here. If I report this, he'll say I attacked him first, or that I was on drugs, or something. They'll believe him over me." Marcus felt the familiar weight of helplessness settle over him. This was bigger than anything he could handle, more complicated than his simple life had room for. The smart thing would be to convince Sarah to get professional help and then go back to his routine of work, sleep, and loneliness. But as he looked at this broken girl on his couch, shivering youth next morning arrived gray and cold, with the kind of light that made everything look tired. Marcus had spent the night in his uncomfortable kitchen chair, dozing fitfully while keeping watch over Sarah. Every few hours, he would check to make sure she was still breathing, still warm under the pile of blankets he had covered her with. He had never been responsible for another person's well-being before, not like this, and the weight of it kept him awake. Sarah had slept deeply, the kind of exhausted sleep that comes after trauma. When she finally woke up around 9 in the morning. She was disoriented and in pain. Marcus heard her stirring and immediately got up from his chair, his back protesting from the awkward sleeping position. "How are you feeling?" he asked, keeping his distance so he wouldn't frighten her. In the daylight, he could see her injuries more clearly. Her left eye was swollen nearly shut, and there were bruises on her neck that looked like handprint marks. Whoever had hurt her had tried to strangle her. Sarah tried to sit up and immediately winced. "Everything hurts," she said honestly. "But I'm alive. Thank you for—" She paused, looking around the small apartment. "For everything." Marcus had made coffee, and the smell filled the tiny space. He poured 2 cups, adding extra sugar to Sarah's because he remembered reading somewhere that sugar helped with shock. His hands shook slightly as he handed her the mug, and he realized that he was nervous. He had not had a real conversation with another person in months. "Can you tell me your full name?" Marcus asked gently. "In case someone comes looking for you, I want to know what I'm dealing with." "Sarah Chun," she said, wrapping her hands around the warm coffee mug. "I'm 19. I'm a sophomore at Wayne State, studying social work." She laughed bitterly. "Ironic, right? I want to help people, but I can't even help myself." Marcus sat down across from her, choosing his words carefully. "What happened with your boyfriend? The one who did this?" Sarah was quiet for a long time, staring into her coffee. When she finally spoke, her voice was flat, like she was reciting facts from a textbook. "His name is Derek Walsh. He's 28, been a cop for 6 years in Chicago. We met at a coffee shop near my community college campus there. He seemed perfect at first, handsome, confident, protective. My parents loved him because he had a steady job and treated me like I was precious." She took a sip of coffee and continued. "The control started small. He didn't like my friends, said they were bad influences. He wanted to know where I was all the time, said it was because he worried about me. He convinced me to move in with him after we'd been dating for 8 months. That's when things got really bad." Marcus felt familiar anger building in his chest. He had seen this pattern before, had even lived through a version of it with Linda, though his situation had never turned violent. "He hit me for the first time on my 18th birthday, Sarah said. I had gone to lunch with my mom without telling him first. When I got home, he said I had disrespected him, that girlfriends should check with their boyfriends before making plans. Afterward, he cried and said he was sorry, that he had never hit a woman before, that I brought out something protective in him that sometimes went too far." Sarah laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I believed him. I thought it was my fault for not communicating better. He bought me an expensive necklace the next day and took me to dinner at the fanciest restaurant in the city. He was so charming that the waitress commented on what a lucky girl I was." Marcus wanted to say something, to offer comfort or wisdom, but he realized he had no idea what the right words would be. His own marriage had fallen apart, and his daughter barely spoke to him. What advice could he possibly give? "It escalated from there," Sarah continued. "The hitting became more frequent. He started controlling my money, monitoring my phone, making me account for every minute of my day. When I tried to talk to my parents about it, he had already gotten to them. He told them I was going through a difficult phase, maybe using drugs, definitely hanging out with the wrong people. He was so convincing, so concerned and loving in front of them." She paused to touch her swollen eye gingerly. "The worst part was that I started to believe I deserved it. Derek was smart about it. He would point out real mistakes I made and then use them to justify his reactions. I forgot homework assignments. I was late meeting him a few times. I burned dinner once. In his version of reality, these were serious character flaws that needed to be corrected." Marcus felt sick listening to this. He thought about Maya, about how he would react if someone ever hurt her this way. The rage that built up in him was so intense that he had to set down his coffee cup because his hands were shaking. "How did you get away?" he asked. "My college advisor," Sarah said. "Mrs. Patterson. She noticed that my grades were slipping and that I always had some kind of injury. She asked me to stay after class one day and just said, 'Sarah, are you safe at home?' I broke down crying right there in her office." Sarah smiled for the first time since Marcus had found her. "Mrs. Patterson didn't lecture me or tell me what I should have done differently. She just listened and then helped me make a plan. She had connections at Wayne State and helped me get a transfer and financial aid. She even helped me find a safe house where I could stay for a few weeks while I got on my feet." "So you came to Detroit?" 3 months ago, I got a dorm room, started classes, got a part-time job at a bookstore near campus. I thought I was free. I thought Derek would move on, find someone else to control. I was careful not to post anything on social media, didn't contact any of our mutual friends. But somehow he found me. Sarah's voice became small and frightened again. He was waiting outside my dorm last night when I came back from the library. He said he missed me, that he had realized he couldn't live without me. When I told him to leave me alone, that I was calling campus security, he grabbed me and dragged me to his car. Marcus felt his jaw clench. What happened then? He drove around for hours, yelling at me, telling me how I had humiliated him by leaving, how I had made him look like a fool. He said he had taken vacation time to come find me, that he had spent money he didn't have on a hotel room and gas. He made it sound like I owed him something for the trouble I had caused. Sarah's hands were shaking now, and Marcus wanted to reach out and comfort her somehow, but he didn't want to frighten her with unwanted contact. He pulled over in some industrial area and started hitting me, Sarah continued. He said he was going to take me back to Chicago, that I belonged to him, and no one else would ever want me anyway. He said after he was done teaching me a lesson, I would be grateful to have someone who cared enough to come find me. Marcus felt rage building in him like he had never experienced before. He thought about his security guard training, about the self-defense classes he had taken years ago when he worked at the plant. He thought about finding this Derek Walsh and making him pay for what he had done. How did you get away from him? Marcus asked, trying to keep his voice calm. He was drunk, Sarah said. I could smell it on his breath. When he got out of the car to come around to my side, he stumbled. I managed to open the door and run. He chased me for a while, but I knew the neighborhood better than he did. I hid behind a dumpster for 2 hours until I heard his car drive away. Then, I just started walking. I didn't know where I was going. I was lost and hurt and scared, and then it started raining. Sarah looked around Marcus's small apartment. I don't remember much after that until I woke up here. I thought I was going to die in that alley. They sat in silence for a while, the weight of Sarah's story settling between them. Marcus realized that this was the longest conversation he had had with another person in over a year, and certainly the most important one. This girl had trusted him with her darkest secrets, had put her safety in his hands. What do you want to do now? Marcus asked finally. I don't know, Sarah said honestly. I can't go back to my dorm room. Derek knows where it is. I can't call the police because who would believe me over a cop? I can't call my parents because they think Derek is wonderful and I'm the problem. I don't have anywhere to go. Marcus found himself saying something that surprised him. You can stay here for a while, until we figure out something better. Sarah looked at him with shock. I can't ask you to do that. You don't even know me. I could be lying about everything. I could be dangerous. Marcus almost laughed at that. This tiny, injured girl was worried about being dangerous to him. You're not lying, he said. And you're not dangerous. And I know what it's like to have nowhere to go. Why would you help me like this? Sarah asked. What do you get out of it? It was a fair question, and Marcus thought about it seriously before answering. I have a daughter, he said finally. She's about your age. She lives in California with her mom, and I hardly ever see her anymore. But if she was in trouble like you are, I would want someone to help her. I would want someone to give her a safe place to stay. Sarah started crying again, but this time the tears seemed different. I promise I won't be any trouble, she said. I can sleep on the couch. I can help with groceries and cleaning. I'm good at cleaning. Marcus realized that Sarah was used to having to earn her place, used to proving that she deserved kindness. You don't have to earn your way, he said gently. You just have to heal and figure out what you want to do next. The rest of that day was awkward but peaceful. Marcus called in sick to work, something he had never done in the entire time he had held the security job. He helped Sarah take a shower, giving her clean clothes and privacy while he waited in the kitchen. When she emerged wearing his old Wayne State sweatshirt and a pair of sweatpants that were too big for her, she looked even younger and more fragile. Marcus made grilled cheese sandwiches for lunch, and Sarah ate like she had not had a real meal in days. She told him about her college classes, about her dream of becoming a social worker who helped women escape domestic violence. She talked about the books she was reading and the job at the bookstore that she probably wouldn't be able to go back to now. In return, Marcus found himself talking about his own life in ways he had not done in years. He told Sarah about Maya, about how proud he had been of her and how much he missed being her father. He told her about the plant closing and the divorce and the long stretch of unemployment that had nearly broken him. "You're not broken," Sarah said when he finished. "You're just stuck. There's a difference." "How do you figure?" Marcus asked. "Broken people don't stop to help strangers in the rain," Sarah said simply. "Broken people don't invite homeless girls into their apartments. Broken people don't call in sick to work to take care of someone they just met." Marcus had never thought of it that way. For 3 years, he had seen himself as fundamentally damaged, as someone who had failed at the most important things in life. But, looking at himself through Sarah's eyes, he began to see someone different. Someone who still had the capacity for goodness, even after everything that had gone wrong. That evening, Marcus made spaghetti for dinner, and they watched an old movie on his small television. Sarah fell asleep halfway through, her head dropping onto his shoulder. Marcus sat very still, not wanting to wake her, surprised by how right it felt to have another person in his space. As he listened to Sarah's quiet breathing and watched the rain continue to streak down his windows, Marcus realized that something had shifted inside him. For the first time in years, he felt necessary. For the first time in years, someone needed him to be strong and reliable and good. 3 weeks had passed since Marcus found Sarah in the rain, and his small apartment had transformed in ways he never could have imagined. What had once been a sparse, lonely space now showed signs of life. Sarah's textbooks were stacked on the kitchen table next to Marcus's crossword puzzle books. Her coffee mug sat beside his in the sink. A small plant she had bought with her first paycheck from a new job sat on the windowsill, bringing a splash of green to the gray walls. Sarah had healed physically faster than either of them expected. The swelling around her eye had gone down, and the bruises had faded to yellow and brown patches that makeup could mostly hide. Her left arm hadn't been broken after all, just badly sprained, and the range of motion was coming back with the exercises Marcus had found online. But the emotional healing was taking longer, and Marcus was learning to navigate the careful balance of being supportive without being overbearing. They had developed routines together that felt surprisingly natural. Marcus would make coffee in the mornings while Sarah showered and got ready for her classes. She had been able to re-enroll at Wayne State under a different last name, using her mother's maiden name and some creative paperwork that a sympathetic administrator had helped arrange. She took the bus to campus every day, and Marcus insisted on walking her to the bus stop and being there when she returned in the evenings. Sarah had found a new job at a small nonprofit organization that helped homeless families find temporary housing. The pay was minimal, but she loved the work, and it gave her a sense of purpose that she had been missing. She would come home in the evenings full of stories about the families she was helping, about children who reminded her of herself at that age, about women who were escaping situations similar to what she had been through. Marcus had started looking forward to these evening conversations more than anything else in his day. Sarah had a way of seeing hope in situations that seemed hopeless, of finding humor in circumstances that should have been devastating. She talked about her clients with genuine affection and respect, never with pity or judgment. Marcus began to understand that Sarah's experiences had not made her bitter or cynical. Instead, they had given her a deep empathy that made her extraordinary at her job. "I met a woman today who reminded me of you," Sarah had said one evening as they shared a dinner of leftover pizza. "Her name is Denise, and she's been living in her car with her 2 kids for 6 weeks. She lost her job when the restaurant where she worked closed down, and she couldn't make rent." Marcus had learned to pay attention when Sarah told these stories. She wasn't just making conversation. She was working through her own healing by helping others. "What reminded you of me?" Marcus asked. "The way she talked about feeling invisible," Sarah said. "She said she felt like she had disappeared from her own life, like she was watching someone else's problems from the outside. She said people would look right through her when she asked for help, like she wasn't really there." Marcus understood exactly what Sarah meant. He had felt invisible for the past 3 years, like his problems and his pain didn't matter to anyone. But sitting across from Sarah, sharing stories and meals and small daily victories, he was beginning to feel solid again. "Real. Did you tell her about us?" Marcus asked. "About how you ended up here?" Sarah smiled. "I told her about a friend who took me in when I had nowhere to go. I told her that sometimes help comes from the most unexpected places, and that accepting kindness from strangers doesn't make you weak. The word friend hit Marcus harder than he expected. Sarah considered him a friend. When was the last time anyone had called him that? When was the last time he had earned that title? Their friendship was unlike anything Marcus had experienced before. There was no history between them, no shared memories or old grievances. They were creating their relationship from scratch, day by day, based entirely on who they were choosing to be in the present moment. Marcus found this incredibly freeing. With Linda, he had always been compared to the man he used to be, the man he had been when they first met. With Maya, he was haunted by the father he had failed to be. But, with Sarah, he could simply be the man he was right now, and that man seemed to be enough. Sarah was also building a new version of herself. Away from Derek's constant criticism and control, she was rediscovering parts of her personality that had been suppressed for years. She was funny in a quiet, thoughtful way. She was incredibly organized and had transformed Marcus's chaotic apartment into a space that actually functioned. She was brave in ways that she didn't seem to recognize, taking risks every day just by choosing to move forward with her life. The breakthrough came on a Tuesday evening in early November. Marcus had been having a particularly difficult day at work. His supervisor had criticized his report writing, and one of the other guards had made a comment about Marcus being too old and slow for the job. He had come home feeling defeated and worthless, ready to retreat into the television and beer that had been his companions for so many months. But when he walked into the apartment, Sarah was cooking dinner. Actual cooking, not just heating up something from a can. The smell of garlic and onions filled the small space, and she had somehow arranged his few dishes and utensils to make the kitchen look almost elegant. "Bad day?" she asked, looking up from the stove. Marcus started to give his usual response. "Fine, okay, no big deal." But something in Sarah's expression stopped him. She was looking at him with genuine concern, real interest in his answer. When was the last time anyone had cared about his day? "Yeah," he said honestly. "Pretty bad. Want to talk about it?" Marcus found himself telling Sarah about the criticism at work, about feeling like he was failing at even the simplest job, about the constant sense that he was not quite good enough for anything or anyone. Sarah listened without interrupting, without offering solutions, just giving him space to express feelings he had been carrying alone for years. When he finished, Sarah was quiet for a moment. "Then," she said, "you know what I think?" "What?" "I think you're the best security guard they've ever had," Sarah said seriously. "Not because you're the fastest or the strongest, but because you actually care about protecting people. Most security guards are just going through the motions, waiting for their shift to end. But you notice things. You pay attention. You care whether people are safe." Marcus felt something tight in his chest begin to loosen. "How do you know that?" "Because you noticed me," Sarah said simply. "You were tired and cold and just wanted to get home. But you heard someone in trouble and you stopped to help. That's not something most people would do." That night, after Sarah had gone to sleep on the couch, they had established this arrangement without much discussion. Marcus lay in his bed thinking about her words. For 3 years, he had defined himself by his failures: failed husband, absent father, unemployed loser. But Sarah saw him differently. She saw someone worth saving, someone capable of saving others. The next week, Sarah surprised him with an even bigger gift. She had been working late at the nonprofit, helping a family complete paperwork for emergency housing assistance, when she called Marcus at work. "Can you meet me after your shift?" she asked. "There's someone I want you to meet." Marcus was curious, but agreed. When he arrived at the nonprofit's small office, Sarah introduced him to her supervisor, a woman named Janet who was about Marcus's age with kind eyes and a firm handshake. "Sarah has told me so much about you," Janet said. "I understand you work in security?" "Yes, ma'am," Marcus replied, unsure where this was going. "We've been looking for someone to help with our evening safety programs," Janet explained. "We run support groups for domestic violence survivors, and sometimes we have participants who are worried about their safety. Having a security professional present would make a lot of people feel more comfortable." Marcus looked at Sarah, who was trying to hide a smile. "It's volunteer work," she added quickly. "But Janet thought maybe you'd be interested." "The meetings are twice a week," Janet continued. "Tuesday and Thursday evenings." You wouldn't need to do much. Just be present, help people feel safe, maybe walk participants to their cars afterward. Sarah mentioned that you have a background in manufacturing and that you're very observant. Those are exactly the qualities we need. Marcus felt overwhelmed. Someone was asking for his help, his specific skills, and experience. Someone thought he had something valuable to offer. I'd like to try it, he said finally. The first support group meeting was one of the most difficult and inspiring experiences of Marcus's life. 12 women, ranging in age from 18 to 62, sat in a circle in the nonprofit's main room and shared their stories. Some were still in dangerous situations, trying to find the courage to leave. Others had escaped and were rebuilding their lives. A few, like Sarah, were further along in their healing journey and were there to offer support to newcomers. Marcus sat in the corner, trying to be unobtrusive, but he found himself deeply moved by the courage these women showed just by being there. They spoke about fear and shame and the complex emotions that came with loving someone who hurt you. They talked about the practical challenges of leaving abusive relationships, where to go, how to support children, how to start over with nothing. During the break, a woman named Carmen approached him. She was probably in her 40s, with 3 young children who were coloring quietly at a table nearby. "Are you Sarah's friend?" she asked. "Yes," Marcus said. "She talks about you sometimes," Carmen said. "She says you saved her life." Marcus felt embarrassed. "I think it was the other way around." Carmen smiled. "That's what she says too. She says you saved each other." As the weeks passed, Marcus found himself looking forward to the support group meetings as much as Sarah looked forward to her work. The women in the group began to trust him, to include him in their conversations about safety planning and practical concerns. He learned about domestic violence in ways he had never understood before, not just the physical abuse, but the psychological control, the financial manipulation, the way abusers isolated their victims from friends and family. Marcus also began to see patterns in the women's stories that reminded him of his own experiences. The way Derek had convinced Sarah that she was the problem in their relationship was not so different from the way Marcus had convinced himself that he was a failure as a husband and father. The way these women had been made to feel invisible and worthless was not so different from how Marcus had felt for the past 3 years. One Thursday evening, after a particularly intense group session, Sarah and Marcus walked home together in comfortable silence. It had been a difficult meeting. A new woman named Lisa had joined the group, still covered in bruises, still convinced that she deserved the treatment she was receiving from her husband. "Do you think she'll be okay?" Marcus asked. "I don't know," Sarah said honestly. "It took me 3 years to leave Derek, and I had help. Some women never get out." They walked a few more blocks before Marcus spoke again. "I called Maya today," he said. Sarah looked at him with surprise. Marcus had not spoken to his daughter in over 2 months, not since a brief, awkward conversation on her birthday that had left him feeling more distant from her than ever. "How did it go?" "Different," Marcus said. "I told her about you, about the support group, about the work we're doing. She seemed interested. She asked questions." "That's good, right?" "I think so," Marcus said. "She said something that surprised me. She said she was proud that I was helping people." Sarah smiled. "She should be proud. I'm proud of you too." Marcus felt that familiar tightness in his chest, but Maya Johnson stepped off the Greyhound bus at the Detroit station and immediately understood why her mother had been so worried about this trip. The station was grimy and crowded, filled with people who looked like they were carrying their entire lives in plastic bags and worn suitcases. The November air was bitter cold, and Maya pulled her California jacket tighter around herself, realizing she was completely unprepared for Midwest weather. She was 17 now, almost 18, and she had grown tall like her father. Her hair was long and dark, and she had inherited Marcus's thoughtful eyes and quiet way of observing the world. She had not seen her father in person for almost 2 years, not since that awkward weekend when he had visited California and spent the entire time apologizing for things that were in the past. Maya spotted Marcus before he saw her. He was standing near the information booth, scanning the crowd with an intensity she remembered from her childhood. He looked different than the last time she had seen him, still thin, but somehow more solid. He was standing straighter, and there was something in his expression that seemed more alert, more present. When their eyes met, Marcus smiled in a way that Maya had not seen since before her parents' divorce. It was genuine and unguarded, and it made him look years younger. "Maya," he said as she approached, and she could hear the emotion in his voice. "Hi, Dad," she said, suddenly feeling shy. They hugged awkwardly, both of them out of practice with physical affection, but Marcus held on a little longer than Maya expected. "You look so grown up," Marcus said, stepping back to really look at her. "And you're freezing. Come on, let's get out of here." As they walked to Marcus's old Honda, Maya found herself studying her father. He seemed more confident than she remembered, more comfortable in his own skin. When he talked about the drive to his apartment, about where they would go for Thanksgiving dinner, about the things he wanted to show her in Detroit, his voice was animated in a way that surprised her. "I should probably warn you," Marcus said as they drove through neighborhoods that looked nothing like Maya's suburban California town. "My apartment is pretty small, and I have a roommate now." "A roommate?" Maya asked, surprised. Her mother had not mentioned anything about Marcus living with anyone. Marcus seemed nervous suddenly. "Her name is Sarah? She's 19, just a little older than you. She's been staying with me for a few months while she gets back on her feet." Maya felt a stab of something that might have been jealousy. Who was this Sarah person, and why was she living with her father? Why did he seem more comfortable talking about this stranger than he did talking to his own daughter? When they arrived at the apartment building, Maya tried to hide her shock at how run down it was. The hallways smelled like old food and cleaning supplies, and the carpet was worn thin in places. Marcus's apartment was on the 3rd floor, and by the time they reached his door, Maya was beginning to understand just how different her father's life was from the one she had imagined. But when Marcus opened the apartment door, Maya was surprised by what she found inside. The small space was clean and welcoming, with touches that made it feel like a home rather than just a place to sleep. There were plants on the windowsill, books stacked neatly on shelves that had been painted a warm yellow color, and something delicious smelling coming from the kitchen. "Sarah?" Marcus called out. "Maya's here." A young woman emerged from the kitchen, and Maya immediately understood why her father had seemed nervous. Sarah was beautiful in a quiet, natural way, with long dark hair and kind eyes. She was wearing jeans and one of Marcus's old sweaters, and she looked completely at home in the small space. "You must be Maya," Sarah said, smiling warmly. "Your dad talks about you all the time. I feel like I already know you." Maya felt defensive immediately. This girl was only 2 years older than she was, and she was living with Maya's father, wearing his clothes, clearly comfortable in his space. What was their relationship exactly? "Nice to meet you," Maya said politely, but coolly. If Sarah noticed Maya's tone, she didn't show it. Instead, she continued smiling and said, "I hope you're hungry. I've been cooking all afternoon. Your dad told me you love Mexican food, so I made enchiladas." Maya looked at Marcus with surprise. "You remember that I like Mexican food?" Marcus looked pleased. "Of course I remember. You used to make me take you to that place with the mariachi band every year on your birthday." The fact that her father remembered this small detail about her preferences made Maya feel something complicated. For the past few years, she had convinced herself that Marcus had checked out of her life emotionally long before the divorce became final. But here he was, not only remembering what she liked to eat, but apparently talking about her enough that this Sarah person knew about it too. Dinner was awkward at first. Maya felt like she was intruding on someone else's life, watching her father interact with Sarah in a way that seemed easy and comfortable. They had inside jokes and shared references, the kind of conversational shorthand that develops between people who spend a lot of time together. Maya found herself feeling jealous and confused. She had come to Detroit expecting to have her father's full attention, but instead she was sharing him with a stranger. "So how do you two know each other?" Maya asked bluntly during a lull in the conversation. Marcus and Sarah exchanged a look, and Maya caught something passing between them that seemed like communication. "Sarah needed a place to stay," Marcus said carefully. "And I had room." "It's more complicated than that," Sarah added gently. "Your dad saved my life." Maya looked back and forth between them, trying to understand what Sarah meant. "Saved your life how?" Marcus seemed uncomfortable with the attention. "It's not that dramatic. Sarah was in trouble, and I helped her out. Anyone would have done the same thing." No, Sarah said firmly. Not anyone would have done what you did. And Maya deserves to know what kind of man her father is. Over the next hour, Sarah told Maya the story of how Marcus had found her in the alley, how he had taken care of her when she was injured and had nowhere else to go, how he had helped her rebuild her life without asking for anything in return. She talked about the volunteer work they did together at the domestic violence support group, about the women who felt safer because Marcus was there. Maya listened with growing amazement. This was not the broken, defeated man who had visited her in California. This was not the father who had seemed to disappear into his own depression after the divorce. This was someone she had never met before, someone who sounded like the hero she had once believed him to be. Why didn't you tell me about any of this? Maya asked Marcus. Marcus looked down at his plate. I guess I thought you wouldn't be interested. And I didn't want to sound like I was bragging or trying to convince you that I'm different than you remember. But you are different, Maya said. I can see it just from watching you tonight. You seem, I don't know, more like yourself. Your dad is the most genuinely good person I've ever met, Sarah said. He doesn't even realize it, which somehow makes him even better. Maya found herself reassessing everything she had believed about her father. She had come to Detroit prepared to feel sorry for him, to endure a few days of awkward conversation before returning to her real life in California. Instead, she was discovering that Marcus had built a life that was meaningful and full of purpose, even if it wasn't the life anyone had planned for him. The next day was Thanksgiving, and Maya was surprised to learn that they would not be spending it alone. Sarah had invited several women from the support group who had nowhere else to go for the holiday. Marcus had also invited Janet from the nonprofit and a few other volunteers. By Thursday afternoon, the small apartment was filled with 8 people ranging in age from 19 to 65. Maya had never experienced a Thanksgiving like this one. Instead of the formal, somewhat tense family dinners she was used to, this felt like a celebration among people who genuinely enjoyed each other's company. The women from the support group treated Marcus with a combination of respect and affection that Maya found touching. They clearly saw him as a protector, someone they could count on, and they included Maya in their conversations as if she were already part of their extended family. Carmen, the woman with 3 young children, sat next to Maya during dinner. Your father is very proud of you, she said quietly. He is? Maya asked. He talks about you all the time, Carmen continued. He shows us pictures on his phone, tells us about your grades, and your plans for college. He lights up when he talks about you. Maya felt something shift inside her chest. I thought he had forgotten about me, she admitted. Carmen smiled. Honey, that man thinks about you every single day. Sarah says he counts the days until your birthday, until Christmas, until any excuse he has to call you. He's just scared that you don't want to hear from him. Maya looked across the table at Marcus, who was listening intently to something Janet was saying about the nonprofit's expansion plans. Sarah was beside him, occasionally adding to the conversation, and Maya could see how comfortable they were together. But she also noticed that Marcus kept glancing at her, checking to make sure she was included in conversations, making sure she was having a good time. After dinner, while the other guests were helping clean up, Maya found herself alone with Sarah in the kitchen. Can I ask you something? Maya said. Of course. Are you and my dad together? Like romantically? Sarah smiled and shook her head. No, we're not. We're family, but not in that way. Your dad saved my life, and I'd like to think I helped save his too, but it's not romantic. We're more like siblings, I guess, or a father and daughter. Maya felt a relief she didn't expect. My mom was worried about that. She thought maybe Dad was going through some kind of midlife crisis. Your mom cares about your dad, Sarah observed, even after everything that happened between them. Yeah, Maya said. She does. She worries about him being alone. He's not alone anymore, Sarah said simply. And neither am I. We built a family together, him and me and all the people who come through the support group. It's not a traditional family, but it works. That night, after the guests had gone home, Maya sat with Marcus on the couch while Sarah cleaned up the kitchen. The apartment felt warm and full of love in a way that surprised Maya. Dad, she said quietly, I need to apologize for something. Marcus looked at her with concern. What for? For giving up on you, Maya said. For believing that you didn't care about me anymore. For not calling you more often or trying harder to stay connected. Marcus felt tears threatening for the second time in as many months. Maya, you don't need to apologize for anything. I'm the one who let you down. I'm the one who stopped trying to be the father you deserved. But you didn't stop, Maya said. You just lost your way for a while. And now you found it again. They talked until almost midnight, sharing stories and memories, filling in the gaps that the past 3 years had created between them. Maya told Marcus about school, about her plans to study education, about the boy she was dating, and the friends who meant the most to her. Marcus told Maya about his work, about the women in the support group who had taught him new ways to think about strength and courage. I want to visit more often, Maya said as they were getting ready for bed. Maybe I could come back for Christmas break. I would love that, Marcus said. But what about your mom? What about your life in California? California is where I live, Maya said. But this 2 years after Maya's Thanksgiving visit, Marcus stood in front of the bathroom mirror in his new apartment, adjusting a tie that Sarah had helped him pick out the night before. Today was a day he had never imagined possible during those dark months after his divorce. Today, Maya was graduating from high school in California, and Marcus was flying out to attend the ceremony. Even more remarkably, Linda had invited him to the graduation party afterward. The past 2 years had brought changes that Marcus still sometimes couldn't believe were real. The nonprofit where Sarah worked had offered him a full-time position as their security coordinator and community outreach specialist. The pay was better than his old security job, and, more importantly, the work felt meaningful. Marcus had discovered that he had a talent for connecting with people who were struggling, for making them feel safe and heard. The support group had grown from 12 women meeting twice a week to a full program that served over 60 families. Marcus had helped design safety protocols and had trained other men to assist with the evening programs. He had also started speaking at community events about domestic violence prevention, sharing what he had learned from the brave women who had trusted him with their stories. Sarah had finished her degree in social work and had been promoted to assistant director of the nonprofit. She had also met someone, a kind, gentle man named David who worked as a teacher and who treated Sarah with the respect and love she deserved. Marcus had been suspicious of David at first, protective in the way that fathers are protective of their daughters. But Sarah's happiness was evident, and David had proven himself to be everything that Derek had not been. Sarah and David were planning to get married in the spring, and they had asked Marcus to walk Sarah down the aisle. The request had moved Marcus to tears. In all his years of marriage to Linda, in all his dreams about Maya's future, he had never imagined that he would play such a role in anyone's wedding. But Sarah had become his daughter in every way that mattered, and giving her away to a man who truly loved her felt like one of the greatest honors of his life. The apartment where Marcus now lived was in a better neighborhood, a 2-bedroom place that Sarah had helped him find when she moved in with David. It was the first time in 4 years that Marcus had lived alone, but the solitude no longer felt like loneliness. His home was a place where friends felt welcome, where support group members could come for coffee and conversation, where Maya could visit and feel comfortable. Maya had kept her promise to visit more often. She had spent Christmas break with Marcus the year before, and she came to Detroit for a week every summer. Their relationship had transformed from the awkward, guilt-laden interactions of the post-divorce years to something that felt genuine and strong. Maya called Marcus every Sunday evening, and they talked about everything from her college plans to her relationships to her growing interest in social justice work. Linda had been skeptical at first about Maya's renewed relationship with her father. She had worried that Marcus was putting on an act, that he would eventually disappoint Maya again. But as the months passed, and Maya returned from Detroit visits glowing with stories about her father's work and his friends, Linda began to soften. She had even called Marcus herself a few times, thanking him for being present in Maya's life in a way that she had feared he never would be again. The phone call inviting Marcus to Maya's graduation had come 3 months earlier. Linda had been nervous on the phone, stumbling over words as she explained that Maya had specifically requested that both her parents be there. "She wants you to meet Richard," Linda had said, referring to her new husband. "And she wants to celebrate with all of us together. I know it might be awkward, but it would mean a lot to her." Marcus had agreed immediately. The idea of being included in Maya's major life events, of being considered an essential part of her support system, was worth any amount of awkwardness. Now, as Marcus finished getting ready for his flight, he thought about how different this trip felt from his last visit to California 3 years earlier. Then, he had been desperate and broken, begging Linda to give him another chance, trying to convince Maya to forgive him for failing as a father. This time, he was going as an invited guest to celebrate his daughter's achievements, as a man who had earned his place in her life. Sarah knocked on his bedroom door and then entered, carrying a cup of coffee and wearing her work clothes. "You ready for this?" she asked, smiling. "I think so," Marcus said. "It still doesn't feel real that Linda actually wants me there." "She sees who you've become," Sarah said. "And, more importantly, Maya sees it. You're not the same man who left Detroit 3 years ago." Marcus sat on the edge of his bed and looked at Sarah seriously. "I need to thank you for something." "Marcus, we've been through this." "No, let me say it," Marcus interrupted. "I need to thank you for giving me back my daughter. Everything good that's happened in the past 3 years started with you trusting me that night. If you hadn't believed in me, I never would have believed in myself." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "You gave me a family," she said. "You gave me a safe place to heal and grow. You showed me what good men look like. If I helped you become the father Maya needed, it's because you showed me what good fathers were supposed to be." They hugged, the kind of embrace that happens between people who have saved each other's lives in ways both dramatic and subtle. The flight to Los Angeles was smooth, and Marcus found himself actually enjoying the experience of traveling. He read a book that Sarah had recommended, took notes for a presentation he was giving the following week about workplace safety programs for domestic violence survivors, and allowed himself to feel excited about seeing Maya. Linda met him at the airport, and Marcus was surprised by how comfortable their interaction felt. She looked good, happy, and relaxed in a way that he remembered from their early marriage. Her new husband Richard was with her, a man about Marcus's age with kind eyes and an easy smile. "Marcus," Linda said, hugging him briefly. "Thank you for coming. Maya is so excited." "Thank you for including me," Marcus replied. "It means everything." Richard shook Marcus's hand firmly. "I've heard so much about the work you're doing in Detroit," he said. "Maya is incredibly proud of you." The drive to Linda's house, now Linda and Richard's house, took them through neighborhoods that looked exactly as Marcus remembered, suburban and manicured and prosperous. Maya burst out of the front door before they had even parked, and Marcus felt his heart lift at the sight of her. She was 18 now, tall and confident, with Linda's grace and Marcus's thoughtful eyes. She wore her cap and gown with obvious pride, and when she hugged Marcus, he could feel how solid and strong she had become. "Dad," she said, stepping back to look at him. "You look great. I love the tie." Sarah picked it out, Marcus admitted. "How is Sarah? How's David? Are they excited about the wedding?" Maya's easy familiarity with the people in Marcus's life still amazed him. She knew Sarah almost as well as he did, had video called with David several times, and had already bought a dress to wear to their wedding. His daughter had seamlessly integrated his new life with her own, had embraced the unconventional family he had built. The graduation ceremony was held at Maya's high school, a sprawling campus that served one of the wealthiest districts in the area. Marcus sat between Linda and Richard, watching hundreds of teenagers in caps and gowns receive their diplomas. When Maya's name was called, Marcus stood and cheered louder than he had ever cheered for anything in his life. After the ceremony, they went back to Linda and Richard's house for a party that included Maya's friends, extended family members, and neighbors. Marcus had been nervous about this part of the day, unsure how he would fit into Linda's social circle, many of whom remembered him from his lowest moments. But Maya kept him close, introducing him proudly to her friends and teachers, talking about his work in Detroit with obvious admiration. "My dad helps women escape from dangerous relationships," she would say. "He runs support groups and speaks at conferences about domestic violence prevention." Marcus watched his daughter with wonder. She had become exactly the kind of person he had hoped she would be: confident, compassionate, socially aware. She talked about her plans to study education and social work, about her desire to work with at-risk youth, about her belief that everyone deserved a chance to change, and grow. She's amazing, Richard said, joining Marcus on the back patio where he had stepped outside for some air. Linda did an incredible job raising her. She did, Marcus agreed. I missed a lot of years. I'm grateful that Maya is willing to give me a second chance. Richard was quiet for a moment, then said, Can I tell you something? Linda was terrified when Maya started wanting to visit you. She was afraid you would let Maya down again, or that you would try to turn her against us. Marcus felt a stab of guilt. I understand why she would worry about that. But when Maya came back from that first visit, talking about you and Sarah and the work you were doing, Linda realized that you had become the kind of man she always believed you could be. She told me once that she married the potential she saw in you. But that potential took longer to develop than either of you expected. Marcus thought about that conversation for days afterward. The idea that Linda had seen something in him that even he hadn't recognized, that she had been waiting for him to become the man he was now, was both humbling and healing. Maya's graduation party lasted until late in the evening. As the last guests were leaving, Maya pulled Marcus aside. Dad, I have something to tell you, she said, looking nervous. What is it? I've been accepted to Wayne State, Maya said. In Detroit. I want to study social work, and I want to be close to you and Sarah. I want to learn from the program you guys have built. Marcus felt like the ground had shifted beneath him. Maya, are you sure? What about staying close to your mom and Richard? What about all your friends here? Maya smiled. Mom and I talked about it for months. She's supportive. She knows that Detroit is where I can learn what I really want to learn. And Richard thinks it's a great opportunity. But the neighborhood where I live, it's not like this, Marcus said, gesturing around the well-appointed suburban home. It's not always safe or comfortable. Dad, Maya said, taking his hands in hers. I've been safe and comfortable my whole life. Now I want to be useful. I want to do work that matters. I want to learn from people like you and Sarah who know what it means to help others heal. Marcus felt tears threatening again. His daughter, his brilliant, compassionate daughter, wanted to be part of the life he had built. She wanted to learn from his experiences, to carry forward the work that had given his life meaning. Are you sure? He asked one more time. I've never been more sure of anything, Maya said firmly. That night, Marcus lay in the guest room at Linda and Richard's house, staring at the ceiling and marveling at the turns his life had taken. 3 years ago, he had been a broken man who believed his daughter was lost to him forever. Now, she was planning to move to Detroit to be near him, to learn from the work he was doing, to become part of the community he had helped build. He thought about Sarah, probably at home with David, planning their wedding and their future together. He thought about the women in the support group who trusted him to keep them safe. He thought about Janet and the other staff at the nonprofit who valued his contributions. He thought about Maya, asleep down the hall, planning to build her adult life around the foundation he had helped create. Marcus had learned that salvation rarely looked the way people expected it to. He had expected to save his marriage, his job, his old life. Instead, he had saved a stranger in an alley, and that stranger had saved him right back. Together, they had built something new and unexpected and beautiful. The next morning, Linda drove Marcus to the airport. As they said goodbye, she hugged him tightly. Take care of her in Detroit, Linda said. But not too much care. She needs to learn to be strong on her own. She's already strong, Marcus said. You made sure of that. We both did, Linda said. Finally, the flight back to Detroit was different from any flight Marcus had ever taken. He was returning home not as a man running away from failure, but as a father whose daughter chose to follow him. He was returning to work that mattered, to friends who respected him, to a life that had meaning and purpose. Sarah and David met him at the Detroit airport, eager to hear about the graduation and Maya's decision to attend Wayne State. As they drove through the city streets, Marcus looked at the neighborhoods he had come eels-like home to. Differently than before, but maybe better. Does that make sense? Marcus smiled. Perfect sense. As Maya settled onto the couch that Sarah had insisted she take for the weekend, she thought about how wrong she had been about her father's life. She had expected to find him diminished and defeated. Instead, she had found a man who was using his own struggles to help others heal from theirs. She had found a father who was exactly the kind of person she hoped to become. In the morning, Sarah would drive Maya to the airport, and they would exchange phone numbers and promises to stay in touch. Maya would return to California with stories that would amaze her mother and friends. But, more importantly, she would return with the knowledge that her father had not been lost after all. He had been transformed. Marcus lay awake long after Maya and Sarah had gone to sleep, thinking about the past few days. His daughter was proud of him. She wanted to visit again. She had seen the life he had built and found it worthy of respect. For the first time since the divorce, Marcus could imagine a future that included regular contact with Maya, holidays spent together, a relationship that could grow stronger over time instead of weaker. He thought about the man he had been 3 years ago, alone and hopeless in this same apartment, and marveled at how completely his life had changed. All because he had chosen to help a stranger in the rain. All because Sarah had chosen to trust him. All because both of them had been brave enough to build something new from the wreckage of their old lives. Tomorrow, Maya would fly back to California, but the distance between them would never feel as vast as it once had. Tomorrow, Marcus would return to his security job and his volunteer work, but now he would do those things as a man whose daughter was proud of him. Tomorrow, he and Sarah would continue the quiet work of healing themselves and helping others heal, knowing that their makeshift family had just gotten a little bit bigger and a lot stronger. This time it was a good feeling. She wants to visit, he said. Maya. She asked if she could come see Detroit for Thanksgiving. Marcus, that's wonderful. Sarah exclaimed. What did you tell her? I said yes, Marcus said. But I'm terrified. What if she gets here and realizes I'm still the same loser who couldn't keep his life together? What if she's disappointed? Sarah stopped walking and turned to face him. Marcus Johnson, she said firmly. You are not the same man you were 4 months ago. You're not even the same man you were when you found me in that alley. You're someone who saves people now. You're someone who builds families out of nothing. You're someone who gives lost people a place to belong. Marcus felt tears threatening, something that had rarely happened in the past 3 years. You think Maya will see that? I think Maya will see her father, Sarah said. The father she always knew was in there somewhere. The one who just needed to remember how to be a superhero. That night, as Marcus lay in bed listening to Sarah moving quietly around the apartment, he realized that his life had become something he had never planned for, but always needed. He had a daughter coming to visit, a friend who believed in him, and work that mattered. He had become part of a community of people who were healing each other through the simple act of showing up. Tomorrow, he would go to his security job and do it better because he remembered why it mattered. Tomorrow evening, he and Sarah would have dinner together and share the small victories and defeats that made up a day. Tomorrow night, he might call Maya again, and this time he would have new stories to tell her about the man he was becoming. For the first time in years, Marcus Johnson was looking forward to tomorrow. He thought about calling Maya, about telling her that he was helping someone, that he was being the kind of man she had once believed him to be. But he decided to wait. He would call her when he had something bigger to report, when he could prove that the superhero she had drawn in purple crayon was still alive inside him somewhere. Outside, the storm was finally beginning to clear, but inside Marcus's small apartment, a different kind of weather was just beginning. Neither Marcus nor Sarah knew it yet, but they were about to become each other's family in ways that would surprise them both. The healing that needed to happen would go both ways, and the changes that were coming would transform not just their lives, but the lives of everyone who knew them. Under his old blankets, Marcus realized that walking away was not an option. For the first time in 3 years, someone needed him. Someone was depending on him to do the right thing. He thought about Maya again, about the superhero she had once believed him to be. Okay, he said quietly. No police. But you can't stay hurt like this. Let me at least try to help you get cleaned up and figure out how bad your injuries are. Then, we can decide what to do next. Sarah looked at him with something that might have been relief. Why are you helping me? She asked. You don't even know me. Marcus thought about that question as he went to get more towels and his few medical supplies. Why was he helping her? Because she reminded him of Maya? Because he was lonely and this gave him a purpose? Because 3 years of emptiness had made him desperate for something, anything, that mattered? All of those things were probably true, but as Marcus looked back at Sarah, he realized the real answer was simpler. He was helping her because it was the right thing to do, and he had forgotten what it felt like to do the right thing. He had forgotten what it felt like to be the kind of man his daughter had once drawn in purple crayon. Outside, the storm continued to rage, but inside his small apartment, Marcus Johnson began to remember who he used to be. Neither he nor Sarah knew it yet, but this was the moment both their lives began to change forever.